Hey guys, tonight we begin with something frothy, ancient, and unexpectedly full of breadcrumbs. You're in Egypt, Old Kingdom Egypt to be exact, where the sun is barely cresting the edge of the desert. The Nile is steaming softly like a morning kettle, and you're already sweating. You're not royalty. You're not even a priest. You're a brewer, which means you get to spend your day elbow deep in warm, sticky grain mush under the watchful gaze of clay statues and the very occasional hungry ibis. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the reed curtain into the brewery courtyard. It smells like warm porridge and a faint whiff of something vaguely tangy. That's how you know the fermentation is going well. A row of women, barefoot, focused, are already pounding emmer wheat in large ceramic basins, the thud-thud rhythm echoing off the sun-baked walls. You give them a lazy nod. No one's had their first sip yet, so everyone's still mostly polite. Your boss, Hinanu, is stirring yesterday's batch with a paddle that might once have been a boat, or he doesn't talk much, unless the mash goes sour or someone misplaces the date syrup. You, on the other hand, are responsible for the morning shift, which mostly means lighting the fire under the warming stones and not tripping over the cats that seem to think they own the brewery. The sun slides a little higher, and the yeast, though you don't yet know what yeast is, gets happier. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians understood fermentation or just kind of observed it like some divine mystery that made things pleasantly bubbly if you left them out long enough. You just know that if you don't get the bread mash into the pots soon, it'll attract flies and the occasional bold goose. You head over to the bread pit, where yesterday's loaves have cooled into firm, slightly undercooked lumps. These aren't your typical crispy baguettes. They're made from half-ground grain, boiled briefly, and left to half-rise in a basket lined with palm leaves. When you bite one, it's as dense as a brick and about as chewy. But you're not eating it. You're turning it into breakfast beer. You tear the loaves into chunks, soaking them in a wide pottery basin of warm river water. Your fingers squish through the dough, pulling apart what the fire didn't finish. It's a surprisingly satisfying feeling, like smashing a very grainy stress ball. Bits of bran float lazily to the top. The color turns a soft brown. Someone behind you drops a cup, curses, and blames an angry ghost. You don't argue. You work fast. The sun will climb higher soon, and no one wants to stir mash in full heat unless they're being punished. One of the boys, a gangly assistant with a nose shaped like a sickle, fans the coals under the stone basin. This is where the fun part happens, heating the mix without boiling it. Because too much heat and the yeast throws a tantrum. Not that you know what yeast is. You just know that angry mash smells like bad sandals. There's a rhythm to this place like a sleepy jazz band. Slap of bread, bubble of pots, thump of sandals on clay. Occasionally, a donkey brays nearby, usually tied up next to a fig tree, waiting to deliver jars to the granary. The donkey, by the way, has more name recognition in town than you do. Suddenly, someone shouts from the other courtyard. It's the temple cook. Apparently, the priests have requested extra sweet beer for today's rituals, which usually means doubling the date syrup and hoping no one notices the leftover sour mash being recycled from 2 days ago. You wonder if the gods care. Probably not. Hathor, the goddess of beer, is said to enjoy things a little wild anyway. A bead of sweat drips from your nose into the mash. You pretend it didn't. Clean water isn't exactly easy to come by, and you're pretty sure everyone's been flavoring their beer with forehead for centuries. The cats slink around the pots, hopeful but ignored. You toss a crumb toward one, mostly out of guilt, and it vanishes under a basket. You think you've seen the same cat in 3 different temples, always eating, always judging. A breeze passes, lifting the smell of yeast and grain into the air. It's not unpleasant, more like the comforting scent of a kitchen that never really closes. A neighbor waves at you from over the wall, holding a jar. You nod. She's probably here for the first pour of the morning. Trade for lentils? She offers. You shrug. It's not your call, but Henanu rarely says no to lentils. You ladle the mash into wide jars, seal them with cloth, and leave them out in the sun. They'll sit all day, bubbling gently like a lazy swamp. Occasionally, someone will come by to whisper a prayer over them or poke the sides just to hear the gurgle. It's a little gross. It's also a sacred process. You suppose a lot of sacred things are also a bit gross. By now the sun is full above the wall, and the courtyard is buzzing, literally. Bees like sweet things, and so do flies, and so do people. You wipe your hands on your tunic, stretch your back, and wonder how many jars you'll need to carry to the storage room before lunch. Probably too many. The donkey snorts as if to agree. You ladle out the first warm jar and hand it to a temple boy who looks like he hasn't slept in days. His eyes are wide, he's twitchy, and he downs half the brew before you've even set the jar down properly. It's not because he's rebellious. It's because this is breakfast. Yes, in Egypt, beer is breakfast. It's also lunch, and occasionally dinner. You're not quite sure if there's a meal that doesn't involve it. It's your morning starter, your midday fuel, and your evening peace offering to the gods or your mother-in-law. Beer is everything. Or as the older brewers say with a straight face, bread is life. Beer is bread that tried harder. You glance around and realize everyone is a little tipsy. Not stumbling, not wild, just mellow. Maybe that's why no one panics when the cat knocks over the measuring reed. No one even shouts. Just a long sigh, a sip, and back to work. See, the Egyptians don't drink beer for fun, exactly. They drink it because water is dangerous. The Nile gives and the Nile takes, mostly parasites. No one trusts plain water, especially in the heat. Beer, by contrast, is boiled, fermented, sacred. It's safer than river water and more interesting than plain porridge. You remember how one old priest once told you, "We are born with water, but we live on beer." That same priest once passed out during a moon festival after mixing his beer with mandrake root. He claimed it helped him see the gods. You're pretty sure it helped him see the floor rapidly. Historians still debate whether Egyptian beer was alcoholic enough to actually get people drunk in a modern sense. Some argue it was mildly intoxicating at best, more like liquid bread than barley wine. Others think certain special brews, particularly for festivals or royal occasions, were much stronger than the daily stuff. Whatever the case, you've seen a lot of people wake up next to empty jars and questionable decisions. Take the neighbor's cousin, for instance. 2 weeks ago, he tried to build a raft out of empty beer pots, claimed he could sail to the goddess Satis and marry her. He made it 10 feet into the Nile before the jars flipped, and he had to be fished out by a passing fisherman. The fisherman got 3 jars of beer for his trouble. The cousin got a week's worth of mockery and a new nickname, Ampherman. Even children drink beer, though theirs is barely fermented, thick like soup, and often mixed with dates or honey. It's more of a meal than a drink. You see a group of them now, under the shade of a sycamore, sipping from tiny cups and gossiping like little market women. One girl insists she saw a crocodile with jewelry on its tail. Another scoffs and says it was probably just a fisherman's wife. The overseer strolls through the brewery now, nodding at the bubbling jars. He stops beside one and mutters a quick prayer to Tenenet, the goddess of childbirth and beer. Yes, both. Because what better way to come into the world than with a midwife in one hand and a cold jar in the other? The overseer tastes the batch, warm, sour, a little nutty. He frowns thoughtfully. "Less date," he says, then walks away. You don't argue. Last time someone argued with him, they ended up cleaning fish scales off amphory for a week. As you stir the mash, your mind wanders to the temples. They brew their own, of course. Special beer for the gods. The temple of Hathor uses wild herbs, some say even opium, in their divine blends. It's reserved for rituals, processions, and very special dreams. You once got a sip from a leftover festival jar. Your tongue went numb, your vision wobbled, and you started reciting poetry you didn't know you knew. Then you fell asleep in a basket of onions. You never touched the ritual brew again. Some noble households brew their own versions too, lighter, spicier, fancier. brewed with cinnamon bark imported from Punt. You've heard rumors that Queen Hatshepsut once served cinnamon beer at her coronation feast. You doubt that. Cinnamon's too expensive to waste on drunk uncles. But the gods get the good stuff. Every morning, priests offer beer to statues, so old no one remembers who they were originally meant to be. The jars are set on stone altars. The scent rises with the incense, and the priests chant through yawns and low-grade hangovers. The gods, you suspect, are too polite to complain. You remember a story the scribes like to tell. Once, the sun goddess Sekhmet became so bloodthirsty she almost destroyed all of humanity. The other gods tricked her by pouring beer dyed red to look like blood across the land. Sekhmet drank it all, got very tipsy, passed out for 3 days, and woke up as the much friendlier Hathor. You like that story? It's the only time excessive drinking ever saved civilization. Nearby, someone is singing. Badly. It's Henanu. He only sings when the batch is going well. You glance into the big pot, frothy bubbles, a soft hiss, the smell of dates and spice. It's a good brew. The flies are hovering, the cats are circling, and someone's child is trying to trade a beetle for a sip. You smile. Another normal morning in the Mudbrick Brewery. You wipe your hands on your tunic, now patterned with abstract flower designs and what might be mashed figure. It's time to prep the bread, if you can call it that. The loaf you pull from the cover basket is more blob than bun, more doughy artifact than anything you'd eat with cheese. It sags slightly in your hands, heavy, slightly sour-smelling, flecked with chaff and the occasional mystery seed. And it's perfect, because in ancient Egypt, beer doesn't start with barley. It starts with bread. This isn't the kind of bread you'd offer at a feast or even pawn off on a neighbor. It's halfway between a thick paste and a half-baked sponge. Made of emmer or barley, the grain is ground roughly, mixed with water, shaped into small, dense lumps, and then not quite cooked. You bake it just enough that it holds together, but not so much that it becomes anything too solid. Its true destiny lies elsewhere. This bread is for mashing, for breaking down, for becoming beer. You begin tearing it apart, chunk by sticky chunk, and dropping the pieces into a clay vat of warm water. The bread soaks, crumbles, dissolves. You stir with a paddle carved from tamarisk wood, occasionally scraping the sides with your fingers, feeling for stubborn lumps. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian beer involved fully baked bread, undercooked loaves, or a sort of soupy sourdough slurry that just pretended to be bread long enough to get invited to the process. Archaeologists have found baked lumps near brewing vats, some carbonized, some half intact, most broken open like something tried to escape from inside. Perhaps yeast. Whatever the truth, the end result is the same. Bread becomes beer. The grain breaks down, releasing sugars into the water. Natural wild yeast clinging to the air, the hands, even the baskets, floats in and begins to feed. And you watch and wait. Today, you're adding some leftover mash from yesterday's batch. It smells sharp, like wet flour and secrets. It's bubbling already, which is a good sign. Unless it's bubbling too much, which could mean it's possessed. You taste a little with your finger. Still beer. Still edible. Probably. Nearby, another brewer is working on a date infusion, sweet beer for temple offerings. He's boiling down dried dates in a pot, occasionally tossing in a sprig of coriander or fenugreek. You once accidentally used his date jar to water the donkey. The donkey didn't complain, but the brewer didn't speak to you for 3 days. As the bread mix begins to break apart, you start to notice the aroma shift, from raw grain to something more like cereal milk left out in the sun. You try not to think too hard about it. The key is to embrace the transformation. Bread is stable, comforting, known. Beer is change. You tell yourself that every day. You don't always believe it. An elder woman walks by with a basket of herbs, pausing to sniff one of the jars. "Too foamy," she mutters. You nod solemnly. She's brewed for 40 years and can tell good beer from spoiled mash just by waving her hand over it. Or so she says. The sunlight slants through the courtyard now, warm on your back. You add a pinch of herbs to your mix, not because it's traditional, but because you're curious. You heard someone say once that brewers in Thebes added juniper to keep the gods awake during offerings. You doubt it works, but it smells nice. Plus, it distracts from a slight sourness developing. You glance around. No one's looking. You had another pinch. Back in the corner, a young boy is pressing old loaves into a mesh basket, letting the liquid seep out into a clay bowl below. It's slow work, but efficient. The bread mash filters through the fibrous weave, leaving a pale, starchy liquid, the early stage of what will, someday soon, become something worth drinking. Hopefully. You once dropped a whole loaf into the filter basket and jammed the system for half a day. The bread wouldn't break down, the juice wouldn't flow, and by the time someone noticed, the entire area smelled like wet socks and disappointment. They still call it the day of the unbreakable loaf. You keep stirring, slow and steady. Froth forms at the edges, soft and brown, like a quiet celebration. The cat hops up on a ledge and watches you like it's judging your technique. You toss a crust. It ignores you. Your hands ache, but you keep going. Brewing beer is physical. It's not delicate temple work or noble scribe play. It's wet. It's sticky. It's repetitive. It's alchemy through exhaustion. The bread must be beaten into submission. The mash must be coaxed, the liquid filtered, the jars sealed. It's not just food. It's ritual. You remember a story, told by your grandmother, who brewed long before you. She said that in the underworld, you can only pass through the fifth gate if you bring a jar of beer and a loaf of bread. Not for you, for the guardian. He doesn't let you by unless you've got lunch. So, she said, always keep a jar hidden near the hearth, just in case you die unexpectedly. You still do. It's currently under the second bench, covered with palm leaves and probably half evaporated. You check the consistency again. Thick, slightly grainy, bubbling at the edges. The kind of mixture that promises fermentation is just around the corner. You nod to yourself. It's nearly ready. The bread has given itself up. It's no longer a loaf. It's liquid memory now, starchy, yeasty, oddly poetic. You whisper a quiet thanks, even though you're not religious. It's what brewers do. It's what bread deserves. You wipe a bit of froth from your wrist and reach for the hot stones. They've been sitting in a clay basin beside the fire, growing steadily angrier all morning. You grab one with wooden tongs, hiss through your teeth as it slips slightly, and drop it, carefully, into the vat. The mash hisses in response, like an annoyed goose. The goal here isn't to boil. That would be catastrophic. No, you're warming the mixture just enough to get it fermenting happily without scaring the wild yeast into a panic. You stir slowly, cautiously, watching for bubbles that are too excited. Brewing is a game of gentle threats, like parenting, but with grain. Hot stones are your makeshift stovetop. There's no kettle, no copper boiler, no temperature gauge, just your eyes, your nose, and the faint sizzling sound of a stone doing its best not to crack in half from thermal shock. You've learned, the hard way, that some stones explode. You still have the scar on your ankle from the incident with the overconfident pebble. Next comes the honey. Not always, but today's brew is temple-bound, which means it needs a little sweetness to flatter the gods' egos. You reach for a clay pot sealed with beeswax. It's warm, sticky, and humming slightly. Not metaphorically, literally. There's a very annoyed bee trapped inside the rim. You offer it a polite excuse and a gentle shake. It flies away, probably to file a complaint with the Apian authorities. You scoop the honey with a flat wooden spoon, watching it drip into the mix like liquid sunshine. The sweetness curls into the grainy depths, thickening the aroma, calming the sour edges. It smells like breakfast and old songs. Some say the honey helps preserve the beer. Others claim it's for flavor. You're not sure. You just know it makes the temple priest smile and the flies more aggressive. Someone walks by carrying a basket of herbs, fenugreek, coriander, dried hibiscus petals. He nods at you, then carefully adds a pinch of something into his own vat. He says it's for balance. You say it smells like pickled goose feet. He doesn't laugh. That's fine. Brewing isn't always about humor. Sometimes it's about listening to your pots. Not with your ears, with your gut. Historians still debate what spices ancient brewers used. Some evidence suggests coriander was popular, maybe even standard. Others point to rare finds: cinnamon from trade, juniper from oases, even blue lotus for ceremonial batches that may or may not have doubled as very mild hallucinogens. You once tasted a blue lotus brew. It made your teeth numb and gave you an overwhelming desire to hug the brewery cat. The cat did not appreciate it. The mash is thicker now, bubbles rising like lazy thoughts. You stir slowly, pushing hot spots toward the edges, folding the honey into every corner. The scent is warm and sleepy, like the moment just before a nap. Your friend Rennie arrives, barefoot and grinning, with a monkey on her shoulder. The monkey isn't hers. It just likes her. Monkeys show up sometimes in the courtyard, usually after stealing figs from the temple trees. This one's name is possibly Thoth, though it doesn't answer to anything but a date pit and mild chaos. Rennie peers into your vat and whistles. "Smells like a good batch," she says, scratching the monkey's head. You nod, proud but cautious, hoping the yeast agrees. Better not let the priest taste it first. He's got the stomach of a goat and the palate of a sandal. You laugh. It's not untrue. The priest in charge of temple rations once complimented a spoiled batch by calling it bold. He later vomited behind the altar and blamed it on moon spirits. You pass Rennie a sample ladle. She sips, raises an eyebrow. "Needs more time," she says. "But I trade you a melon for a jar of this in 2 days." "Deal," you reply. Melons are rare this season. Probably swiped from the palace gardens, but you don't ask. You return to your stirring. The mixture is nearly ready for resting. Soon, you'll pour it into jars and seal them with cloth. They'll sit under the shade, fermenting slowly, swelling slightly with pride and pressure. Some may even hiss when unsealed, like they're annoyed at being disturbed. You remember one jar that exploded in the storage shed, covered a whole corner in sticky foam. The workers declared it haunted and wouldn't go near it for a week. You had to drink the entire batch yourself just to prove it wasn't cursed. It might have been cursed. You don't sleep well on Tuesdays anymore. The courtyard fills with that soft, ancient scent: grain, honey, stone, sun. It's a scent older than most pyramids. Older than most gods, probably. A scent you'd recognize in your bones, even if you woke up in another life. You lower the heat, remove the stones, skim the foam with a carved ladle, flicking it into a bowl for the temple pigs. Yes, pigs. No, you don't ask what they do with it. A shadow passes overhead, maybe a falcon, maybe a kite. The monkey hoots softly. The cat yawns. You feel the breeze shift. Nile-scented, damp, familiar. It's almost time to rest the brew. You hum a little as you work, an old song your grandmother sang while kneading dough. It has no words, just rhythm, like breath, like waves on stone. You glance at the sun's angle, the shadow on the north wall. You nod to yourself. It's a good batch. You press your palm to the jar's rim, testing for warmth. Not hot, just body temp cozy. Like a well-behaved bath. It's ready. You lift the vat gently, muscles protesting, and pour the mixture into wide-mouthed amphorae resting in a circle on the courtyard floor. The liquid sloshes slowly, thick and frothy, forming lazy whirlpools as it settles. A bee investigates and then, thankfully, reconsiders. The amphorae are old. One's chipped on the lip. Another has a faded lotus etched into its side, probably from a festival batch 2 summers ago. You pack clay around their bases to steady them. The ground's uneven, always cracking slightly from sun and age. But these jars know how to sit still. They've been through hundreds of brews. Some have outlived their original potters. Once the beer's resting, there's time for ritual. Always is. You take a pinch of flour and scatter it around the base of the jars. Just enough to feed the gods in the corners, as your great-aunt used to say. You never figured out which gods lived in corners or why they like flour, but you don't mess with tradition, especially brewing tradition. That's how you get mold, or ghosts, or both. Nearby, another team is setting up for the morning offerings. The Temple of Hathor gets its own beer, sweeter, thicker, offered in smaller jars with decorative reeds tucked into the handles. One woman kneels and whispers something to the rim of her amphora. Maybe a blessing, maybe a threat. Brewing is both. You help carry the jars toward the shrine. It's a small building, shaped like an open palm, with a painted relief of Hathor, cow-eared, smiling, maybe a little tipsy-looking if you squint. The air smells of incense, dust, and old promises. You place the jars carefully at her feet. The priest arrives, robes swishing, eyes half-lidded with importance. He nods, waves a hand, and begins chanting. You try to focus, but it's hot and the chanting is long, and he has a voice like a sleepy goat. Still, this part matters. Beer isn't just for people. It's for gods. It's payment. It's prayer. It's celebration. It's forgiveness. When people are born, they receive beer. When they marry, toast with beer. When they die, their tombs are stocked with beer, just in case they get thirsty on the way to the field of reeds. You've seen tomb jars yourself, dug up by curious scribes or overly ambitious teens. The beer inside is always long gone, of course, but the smell lingers, earthy, sour, a little sweet. Like time's breath, historians still argue whether the beer offered to gods was ever actually consumed by humans afterward. Some say the priests drank it as part of the ceremony. Others say it was buried or poured out. You say it depends on how thirsty the priest was that day. Your mother once told you the story of the festival of drunkenness, when the goddess Sekhmet almost destroyed humanity. To calm her bloodlust, the gods tricked her into drinking red beer that looked like blood. She passed out for 3 days, woke up happy, and became the goddess of love. Never underestimate the power of beer. Your mother had said, while balancing 2 amphorae on her shoulders, it can turn a monster into a lover or a party into a riot. It's midday now. The sun has sharpened, the shadows drawn tight. You retreat to the shade of a fig tree, dust on your arms, sweat behind your ears, satisfaction somewhere between your ribs. You sip from your own jar, not the temple batch, just a worker's brew. It's warm, sour, comforting. A group of girls are singing while grinding more grain. The rhythm is simple, repetitive, almost hypnotic. The kind of tune that keeps your hands moving even when your mind floats off toward the horizon. Someone tosses a fig your way. You catch it, grin, bite. It's underripe and sharp, but refreshing. The courtyard buzzes with low conversation and the constant presence of work. People stirring, lifting, scraping, tasting. A baby cries. A dog yawns. A goat escapes and is gently herded back with promises and bribes. It's here, in this space between labor and ritual, that you feel the oldness of it all. Not in a dusty way, in a grounded, breath-deep kind of way. You are one in a long line of brewers, stretching back to the first person who forgot bread in a bowl and dared to sip the soggy aftermath. Somewhere in the palace, nobles are probably sipping their own blend, filtered, chilled in wet cloths, spiced with herbs you've never even smelled. But their jars break just as easily. Their yeast still misbehaves. Beer, after all, is the great equalizer. You sip again. The brew coats your tongue like memory, slightly bitter, slightly sweet, ancient in a way your bones recognize. Behind you, the priest's chanting fades. The jar sits silently in the shrine's shade, sweating gently. You breathe in grain, honey, warmth, something older than language. Then you exhale. You stretch your arms overhead and crack your back, a satisfying little pop that feels like applause for your spine. It's afternoon now. The heat has softened a bit. It's time to haul water. Again, because while beer may be holy, its main ingredient is good old-fashioned Nile River juice. And it doesn't fetch itself. You grab 2 empty jars with loops tied to a yoke, a curved wooden beam meant to sit on your shoulders, and begin the slow shuffle toward the riverbank. The brewery's water storage is nearly empty again, and the overseer made a comment this morning about not letting the gods ferment in filth. He probably meant it poetically. You're choosing to take it as a threat. The Nile sparkles in the afternoon sun, wide and slow-moving, like a giant god napping with one eye open. You keep your eyes peeled, not for pirates, not for priests, for hippos. Yes, hippos. They don't look like a problem from a distance, just big wet rocks with ears. But the moment you step too close, or even think about making direct eye contact, they become 3 tons of toothy rage and surprising agility. You've seen one overturn a fishing boat before lunch. So you stick to the shallows, near the reeds, where the frogs chirp and the fish are too small to cause concern. You lower your jars into the water, watching the bubbles rise. The water's cool, smooth, slightly muddy. The kind of mud that's in your blood by now. Historians still wonder how Egyptians kept their waters safe for brewing. The answer is, they didn't. They trusted fermentation to do the work. The boiling process helped. So did the alcohol. But mostly they relied on experience, instinct, and a general willingness to ignore whatever might have just floated past. You hoist the now heavy jars back onto the yoke and begin your return. It's a walk you've made hundreds of times, each one a tiny exercise in balance, patience, and cursing quietly at tree roots. As you pass the fig orchard, a scribe waves to you from a shaded bench. He's scribbling something onto a sheet of papyrus, muttering to himself and chewing a reed pen. You nod back, try not to spill. He calls out, "Did you hear about the crocodile down near the ferry pier? Took a whole goose." "Not my goose," you grunt. Still dramatic, he says, then returns to his notes. You suspect he's writing a love poem about the crocodile. It wouldn't be the strangest thing you've heard this week. Back at the brewery, you pour the fresh river water into a large basin and watch it mix with yesterday's leftover batch. The smell rises, grainy, sweet, slightly sour, and oddly inviting. You wipe your brow and glance at the sky. Still blue, still cloudless, still judging you. Another team is preparing jars for tomorrow's fermentation. They're cleaning old amphorae with sand and palm fiber, scrubbing away the dregs of past brews. One worker sings as she works, a rhythmic hum that keeps time with her scrubbing. The amphorae clink and clatter, and the air is full of dust and ghostly foam. You help stack the dry jars on a reed mat to dry. Some still smell like their last batch, faint hints of coriander. Overripe figs, maybe a trace of cumin. It's like sniffing an argument between spices. One jar has a crack down the side. Not enough to ruin it, but enough to require a patch. A good jar is like a good friend. It holds secrets and doesn't leak. You think about your own friends. One fell into a vat last year. Another swore he saw the goddess Tauret in the steam once. And Rennie, well, she might actually be a brewing goddess, given how her batches always finish early and never bubble over. She claims it's just technique, but you've seen her whisper to her yeast like it's a pet falcon. There's a saying among brewers: if your beer ferments too fast, it's cursed. If it ferments too slow, it's cursed. If it ferments just right, the gods are drinking it before you are. You don't know if that's true, but you do know that the moment you get complacent, a jar will explode. A monkey will drink your syrup, and someone will blame you for not chanting the right verse at the right time. Speaking of which, a small group of children pass by, chanting an old rhyme about the beer god Tenenet. Grain to mash and mash to foam. Call the goddess, bring it home. If the jar begins to shake, offer figs for Hather's sake. You smile despite yourself. The rhyme's nonsense, but it always gets stuck in your head. You finish cleaning the basin and glance around. Rennie is feeding the monkey a crust of brewing bread. Henanu is asleep against a pillar, snoring through his beard. The cats have taken over the sunny wall again. It's peaceful. For now. You stretch again, back cracking like dry reeds. The Nile breeze rustles the papyrus nearby. It's the kind of breeze that means get moving before the heat comes back. You nod to the breeze, as if it understands, and return to the amphorae. The amphorae you unseal hisses like a sleepy snake. It's been fermenting for 2 days, tucked in a shaded back corner of the courtyard, covered with linen and blessed. Well, spoken to sternly by the elder brewer who says she once made a batch so perfect the gods wept. You tilt it gently, letting the liquid slosh inside. It's a soft sound, like stirring warm soup. Slightly sour and full of strange textures, soft flecks of grain, hints of overripe date, a whisper of ash from the clay it fermented in. You don't hate it. Historians often debate just how beer-like ancient Egyptian beer actually was. Some say it resembled a smoothie crossed with a warm porridge. Others believe higher-class batches were filtered better, even carbonated slightly by fermentation gases. You're You're convinced it mostly tasted like desperation with a sweet finish. You take another sip and nod. Not because it's delicious, but because it's done. A successful ferment. It's not poisonous. It's not sour beyond saving. And no one has passed out after tasting it. Yet, the monkey tries to steal your bowl. You pull it away just in time, giving him the crusty end of a date instead. He accepts the trade, though he still looks a little disappointed. From him is high praise. You catch a glimpse of another worker pouring beer into a conical strainer made of woven reed. She's filtering out the biggest bits, husk, mash. Depends on how many teeth you have left. You remember one scribe who insisted that a proper beer must be filtered twice through linen soaked in pomegranate juice. He got so snooty about it that the brewers began adding extra grit just to annoy him. Eventually, he stopped showing up, but his complaints lingered like stale barley. You walk to the outer wall. You pour beer into the transport jars carefully, avoiding splashes and overflow. The smell of warm grain fills the air. A small group gathers for tasting. Not nobles, not priests, just local workers, masons, fishers, weavers, passing by for their daily rations. Beer is their currency, their fuel, their end-of-shift joy. You ladle some out, each bowl accepted with a quiet nod. A joke or a story. One man claims he once wrestled a hippo after drinking 2 bowls. No one believes him. Another swears her grandmother met Osiris in a dream and he asked for a second helping. That, oddly, people do believe. The brewery courtyard becomes a slow, sleepy party. Nothing wild. Just clay bowls, lazy laughter, the sound of sandals on sand. The air is thick with sun and steam. A scribe appears, same one from the orchard, with a scroll tucked under one arm. Mind if I observe? He asks, already scribbling. You shrug. He pokes his nose over a vat, sniffs, gags a little, then quickly jots something down, probably describing your brew as robust with notes of regret. You resist the urge to pour some on his sandals. He asks about your ingredients, your ratios, your method. You answer as best you can, but most of it is feel, handfuls and heat, instinct and habit. You learn from your mother, who learned from hers, who learned from someone whose name is now a stain on an old wall. He frowns. No records? You gesture toward your heart. Right here. He writes that down, too. You taste the beer again. It's slightly sweeter now, richer. It's settled. It knows itself. And in its warm, sour, half-chewed way, it tells the story of everything that got here. Grain, water, heat, yeast, and you. The sun leans lazily toward the western horizon, and the brewery shifts its pace. The workers are slowing now, the rush of fermentation behind them. The afternoon heat finally loosening its grip. You lean back on an overturned basket, sip from a bowl, and watch as another round of jars is ladled out for distribution. Not just for the gods this time, but for the mortals too. All kinds of mortals. Beer in Egypt isn't just for brewers and priests. It's for everyone, and that includes children. You've seen toddlers wobbling around with their own miniature bowls, small clay cups with carved handles shaped like animals. The beer in those cups isn't strong. Barely fermented, thick like porridge, often sweetened with dates or honey. It's more food than drink, more soup than celebration. But it's beer all the same. Parents swear it helps their kids sleep, helps their stomachs settle, keeps the curses away. You're not sure about that last one, but the first 2 seem true enough. You once tried a sip of the children's brew by mistake. It tasted like soggy raisins and gentle regret. Not bad, but definitely not party material. Meanwhile, the adults, especially the ones doing hard labor, get the real stuff. Pyramid workers? Beer 3 times a day. Stone cutters, brick makers, boat haulers, they all run on it. It's a reward, a ritual, and sometimes the only thing standing between their aching spines and total revolt. You remember visiting a construction site once, delivering beer to a foreman named Jadet who had biceps like marble and a temper like spilled yeast. You showed up late with a half-filled jar, and he glared at you so hard your bread rose. The next time, you brought extra. You're still alive, so it must have worked. There's a scale to the rations, hierarchies of brew. Priests drink one kind. Rich, spiced, strained. smooth as temple chanting and twice as smug. Laborers drink another, hearty, chunky, more filling than flavorful. Children, yet another, barely alive with yeast, sweet enough to make their lips smack. And then there's the Pharaoh. Historians still argue over what, exactly, the Pharaoh drank. Some say he had his own secret blend, enhanced with exotic spices and filtered through fine linen. Others think he drank what the priests did, only with more ceremony and possibly a golden straw. What's certain is that he didn't sip from crack bowls, and he definitely didn't pick bugs out of his foam. Still, you can't help but wonder, does beer taste better when you're divine? Or does it all just start to taste the same when you're surrounded by gold? You watch as Henanu prepares the high-grade temple batch. He adds more honey, stirs with slow precision, sprinkles dried herbs into the top. No children allowed near it. No loud noises. It's sacred, not because the gods mind fermentation errors, but because the priests do. Across the courtyard, a few elders sit in the shade, sipping slowly and trading stories. One claims he once met the Pharaoh. Not directly, he admits, but I saw his elbow at a festival. Another tells a tale of a beer so good it cured someone's hiccups and their bad marriage. A third shakes her head. My first brew exploded, covered the wall, stained my tunic. Made my neighbors go faint. They all nod. Everyone has a story like that. You wander closer, handing out a few refills. One of the elders, a sharp-eyed woman named Panifer, gestures you closer. Want to hear a secret? She whispers. You nod, of course. I once brewed beer so smooth, so sweet, that my husband offered to name our second child after it. What did you name her? Sweet Mash. You choke a little on your sip. Panifer just shrugs. Could have been worse. He wanted frothy, more laughter, soft, wheezy. You sip again, letting the quiet joy soak into your bones. It's easy to forget, sometimes, how much beer connects people here. It's not just a drink. It's a bond, a language, a quiet murmur of understanding shared across class, age, and craft. You think back to the festivals, big ones, loud ones, where even the Pharaoh pretends to smile and the gods are paraded through the streets. Beer flows from golden jars, sloshes over temple steps, gets passed from priest to peasant in a symbolic loop of shared humanity. Sometimes it's chaos. Sometimes it's just beautiful. Of course, not everyone handles beer well. You've seen more than a few red-faced farmers stagger into the canals. You've witnessed an argument between two cousins escalate into a wrestling match that knocked over 3 amphorae in a chicken coop. You've pulled Rennie down from a roof after she swore the moon was giving her instructions. But mostly it's peaceful, companionable. Like now, the light turns golden. The cats stretch and yawn. Someone begins a slow drumbeat on a carved log, just a rhythm to keep the bugs away and the thoughts steady. You sip again and think, not for the first time, that the world makes a little more sense with a bowl of beer in your hand. And maybe, just maybe, the gods agree. You wake early the next morning to the sound of amphorae clinking and someone loudly, almost theatrically, sneezing into the grain bin. It's Rennie. Again, you sit up slowly, spine protesting, and blink blearily at the already bustling courtyard. The day has barely begun, but the first shift is hauling jars onto a cart bound for the quarry. Beer for the bricklayers. There's no coffee in ancient Egypt. No quiet mugs of tea. No croissants, unless you count date-filled flatbread that's been left out too long. Instead, the day begins with a long sip of something that could technically be described as nutritious alcohol slurry. And it's your job to make sure the bricklayers get in one piece and that it doesn't explode halfway there. You help load the jars. These aren't fancy decorative pots. These are big, rounded clay workhorses sealed with date paste and tied shut with reeds. Each jar is etched with a name, a ration mark, and, if you're lucky, a tiny doodle of a sun or a fish, just enough for the foreman to feel like someone cares about aesthetics. Each worker at the quarry gets a daily allowance, roughly 2 large jars of beer, sometimes more in summer. It's not for indulgence. It's calories. It's hydration. It's motivation. Historians still debate how much beer was given to laborers building the pyramids. Some sources say 4 to 5 liters a day. Others think it depended on the season, the project, and how many times the workers complained about back pain. Regardless, it was essential. As one overseer once told you, no beer, no bricks. You hitch the cart to a pair of donkeys, one obedient, the other suspiciously good at kicking. Henino grunts, hands you a small jar of fig paste bribed for the gatekeeper, and sends you off with a nod. It's not a long trip, but it's dusty uphill, and if you spill even one jar, you'll be the official foam waster for at least a week. The road to the quarry cuts through a field of reeds and dust. The air smells like old stone and wet clay. You pass a fisherman who waves a catfish at you like it's a hat. You wave back with a ladle. This is how people communicate here, symbolically. At the gate, the bribe works. The guard, who has one tooth and a suspiciously large collection of sandals, grunts, pockets the fig paste, and waves you through. The bricklayers are already at work, stripped to their loincloths. Muscles taut, skin covered in dust. The sun hasn't even reached its angriest point yet, but sweat is glistening on every brow. You pull the cart into the shade and begin distributing bowls. Some of the workers nod gratefully. Others grab their share and stagger off to lean against the wall like melting statues. One woman holds up her bowl and sniffs. "Coriander?" she asks. "Just a whisper," you reply. She says. "Whisper louder next time." You pour for the next in line. One man sips, sighs, and says, "Tastes like a blessing from a lazy god." You take it as a compliment. Another cradles his bowl like a newborn, murmuring thanks to Hathor under his breath. There's always a bit of ceremony to the first sip, a small pause, a moment of silence, not for reverence, but for appreciation. When you're breaking stones with a bronze pickaxe, even a half-warm, half-chewed barley smoothie feels like a gift. Nearby, a scribe is taking notes. He watches the beer distribution like it's a sacred ritual. He asks how many jars, how much grain, how many workers. You tell him numbers that sound accurate. You don't mention the one jar that cracked and is now being slowly consumed by a very determined ant colony. The scribe hums, nods, writes something, and immediately wanders off to sketch a drawing of someone's lunch. You sit down on a flat stone and sip from your own bowl. It's not your best batch. A little too thin, a little too much date, but gets the job done. Your stomach warms. Your shoulders relax. You glance up at the workers, hammering, lifting, chanting quietly to keep time. You think about how beer doesn't just fuel the labor. It is the labor. It greases the joints of civilization. It holds the walled builders together, one frothy sip at a time. You've heard nobles scoff at beer. They call it a drink for mouths that never taste wine. But you've also seen those same nobles sneak a bowl after a festival, hidden behind a pillar, slurping like children at a fig stand. Beer may not be glamorous. It may not shimmer like spiced wine or sparkle like imported mead. But it's real. It's old. It's comfort in a jar. You sip again and close your eyes. For a moment, there's just the sound of picks on stone, laughter echoing across scaffolds, and the hum of a civilization being built by hand, fueled by grain, and fermented by care. You open your eyes. Time to collect the empty jars. Why midday? The sun is cooking the quarry stones. Your sandals feel like they're made of soup. And the donkeys have declared emotional bankruptcy. You trudge back toward the brewery with the empty amphory bouncing slightly behind you in the cart, every rattle sounding like a personal insult. As you walk, you think about yeast. Well, not yeast exactly. You don't have a word for it. You think of it as the living thing in the air, or the invisible helper who likes warm mash and hates being rushed. Whatever it is, it's the reason your beer ferments. The reason that yesterday's porridge becomes tomorrow's comfort. But here's the thing, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes your batch sits there like a stubborn puddle. No bubbles, no hiss, no rise, just warm silence. And that's when the real fear sets in. The silent dread that maybe, just maybe, the gods didn't like your last offering, or that you forgot to stir clockwise, or that you used the bad honey. Again, fermentation, in your world, is mostly guesswork. It's watching, waiting, listening. It's trusting your nose and your gut. It's knowing when to leave it alone and when to whisper apologies to the bubbling surface. Historians still argue whether Egyptians cultivated yeast from batch to batch, maybe reusing old mash, maybe scraping scum from the best jars, maybe praying really hard. There's some evidence of a practice involving ceramic vessels coated in yeast-rich residue being passed around like heirlooms. Your great-uncle called his the blessed jar and wouldn't let anyone wash it for fear of killing the brew spirits. You understand now what he meant. Back at the brewery, the air is thick with the smell of mash. A new batch is fermenting under the awning, and you can hear the occasional blorp as trapped gases find freedom. You peer into the nearest jar. Froth coats the top. A thin film of scum rides the edges. It's alive, and that's a good thing. You stir it gently with your paddle. Not too fast. Fast stirs anger the yeast. Not too slow. Slow stirs invite flies. You whisper something unintelligible, mostly to yourself, but maybe also to the mixture. It replies with a sleepy bubble. Agreement, probably. Rennie joins you with a basket of dried herbs. She sprinkles in a pinch of fenugreek. This one needs encouragement, she says. You raise an eyebrow. It's sulking. The yeast sulks often. You remember the time a cold snap ruined 3 jars. The ferment stopped completely. No hiss, no bloom, just cold mash and broken dreams. Hinanu declared it a morning batch and poured it out by the river while singing badly. You pretended not to cry. You really like that batch. Today's weather is better. Warm, steady, with just enough breeze to keep the courtyard breathable. You breathe deep, savoring the sour-sweet perfume of fermentation. It's not always pleasant, but it's familiar, comforting, like sweaty bread. You check the older jars, the ones from earlier this week. Their froth is calmer now, their scent more rounded. The raw grain sharpness has mellowed. You know from experience, these are almost ready. Just one more day. You grab a woven cloth and cover the new batch. Not to hide it, just to protect it from overly curious insects and overly enthusiastic monkeys. You tie it down with a strip of linen, muttering a phrase your grandmother used. Sit, bubble, and don't embarrass me. She said it worked 80% of the time. The other 20% involved loud cursing and unexpected vinegar. You walk to the drying mats where a few old loaves lie baking in the sun. These will be the next sacrifice. You poke one. It pokes back. You squint. It's probably just springy from the heat. Probably. Nearby, someone has arranged cracked amphory into a kind of wind barrier. It's not effective, but it looks confident. The wind whips through anyway, fluttering the linen coverings and sending a few fig leaves dancing across the courtyard like awkward birds. The monkey reappears and tries to climb the herb rack. Rennie shouts. The monkey flips her off. It's been that kind of week. You take a break under the fig tree, sipping from a cooling bowl of near-finished brew. It's cloudy, slightly tangy, a little warm from the sun. You imagine this is what clouds would taste like if clouds were made of soup and leftover festival memories. Someone sits beside you. It's Panifer again. She's eating a roasted onion like it's an apple. You ever name a batch? She asks. Just the ones that go bad. She nods. The bad ones deserve names. You cling bowls. You both sip in silence, watching the courtyard buzz with soft movement. Workers ladling mash, cats weaving between pots, a beetle dragging a breadcrumb the size of its own hopes. You think about yeast again, about how something invisible, something so small you can't see it, can transform an entire jar. How it can take the ordinary and make it sing, make it fizz, make it worth drinking. You don't understand it, but you respect it. There's a commotion near the entrance to the brewery courtyard. Loud voices, the familiar sound of sloshing beer, where beer should not be sloshing, and a braying donkey that seems entirely too emotionally invested in whatever's going wrong. You sigh, place your half-finished bowl down on the bench, and rise. You already know what this is. By the time you reach the scene, Hinanu is red in the face, a deeper red than usual, standing beside a tip jar, and gesturing wildly at a younger brewer who looks like he's considering a quick career change to wandering desert hermit. The monkey, of course, is watching with what you can only interpret as smug amusement. What happened? You ask, fully knowing the answer will involve bad stacking and possibly coriander. You put the sweet batch next to the grainy batch. Henna barks, pointing at two very similar-looking jars now cross-contaminating each other on the floor like awkward teenagers at a wedding. Now it's going to taste like he waves his arms. Confusion. The young brewer, eyes wide, murmurs, I thought it was the temple batch. You thought wrong, Neb, Henna growls. You always think wrong. Remember the chickpea incident? Neb winces. You try to mediate. We can salvage some of it. Probably. You glance at the monkey. Unless he tasted it already. The monkey licks its paw. You try not to take that personally. Beer disputes happen. Brewing, like love and public festivals, occasionally brings out the worst in people, especially when coriander is involved. You remember the legendary barley brawl from 2 years ago. One brewer claimed his neighbor had stolen his drying grain. The neighbor accused him of yeast thievery. Voices rose, amphorae were waved threateningly, and someone was hit in the face with a ladle. No one remembers who won, but everyone remembers the priest who tried to mediate and ended up dunked headfirst into the mash pit. Historians rarely write about these beer-related altercations. Too unflattering, perhaps, but you've lived them, and you know that for every quiet courtyard chant and neatly etched amphora, there's also spilled grain, hurt pride, and the occasional ill-timed goat. Today's spat calms quickly. You help Neb separate what can be saved, strain off the top few inches of foam, and redistribute the rest into smaller jars. One is clearly destined for a temple offering. You consider lying about what's in it. You also consider bribing the monkey to accidentally knock it over before the priest finds out. Henanu, now brooding under the awning, mutters about brew purity and standards and the decline of discipline. You nod supportively, offer him a bowl, and gently steer him away from the ladles. He drinks, sighs, and says, tastes like a very organized mistake. You call that a win. Not long after, the courtyard returns to its gentle hum. Amphorae are wiped clean. Cloths are retied. The monkey is scolded and bribed in equal measure. You settle back into your tasks. You're stirring a new batch when the priest arrives. Not just any priest. The priest. Tall, hollow-cheeked, and wearing so much linen, he probably rustles when he walks. He nods at you once, barely. His gaze is fixed on the temple jars, specifically the one Neb. Improved. You feel Rennie drift closer to your side. Do we run? She whispers. Not yet. You whisper back. The priest lifts the lid, sniffs, and frowns. You see it happen in slow motion. The moment his brows pinch together, the inhale deepens, and a hint of coriander hits his holy sinus cavity. He turns. This jar, he says. Yes, you say, as neutrally as possible. It is, he trails off. You brace yourself. Adventurous. You blink. Rennie snorts. I shall meditate on its meaning, the priest continues, placing the lid back as though sealing in divine mystery. Perhaps the goddess wishes us to embrace complexity. You nod slowly. Perhaps she does. He strides out of the courtyard, robes flowing, sandals clacking like punctuation marks. You don't exhale until he's gone. Neb peeks around a corner. Did we get away with it? For now, Rennie mutters. You hand him a bowl. Next time, label the jars. Yes, yes, he says, drinking deeply. That's very fair. The monkey, sensing the tension is over, resumes chewing on someone's sandal. You stir your vat and reflect. Brewing isn't just about grain and water. It's about people, egos, accidents, improvised theology. Beer is alive, not just in the jars, but in the lives of everyone who touches it. It bubbles with tension, sweetness, mistakes, and stories. And coriander. Always coriander. You spend a late afternoon crouched in a corner of the brewery courtyard, patching a cracked jar with a paste of clay and sand, humming softly under your breath. It's not a particularly tuneful hum, but it keeps the rhythm while you smear the sealant in tight circles around the break. Across from you, Panifer is shelling fava beans with the same level of seriousness she once used to exorcise a bad batch of beer. You glance over at the main vat, where Rennie and another brewer are stirring quietly. There's a lull in the activity, just enough calm for a little gossip. Did you hear about the weaver's daughter? Panifer asks casually. You raise an eyebrow. The one with the scarab tattoo? Panifer nods. Apparently she brewed a love potion batch last week. Told the boy it had mint and blue lotus. That'll make your tongue dance, you say. He danced, all right. Right out of town. You both chuckle. Here's the thing most visitors don't realize. Beer in Egypt isn't just about grain and water. It's about people, and especially about women. Brewing is women's work. Not exclusively, of course. There are plenty of men in the craft. But at its roots, in homes, in neighborhoods, in temples, it's the women who manage the brew. Some say it's because women understand fermentation better. Some say it's because men don't have the patience. And others say it's simply tradition, passed from mother to daughter, sister to sister. Like a good bread starter or a curse you pretend is a lullaby. Historians agree that brewing was often a domestic task, and women, especially those not of high social rank, handled most of it. The scale was small. The tools were simple. The method was mostly learned through repetition, observation, and stories whispered while kneading dough. You learned from your mother. She learned from hers. The recipe was never written down. Why would it be? Your hands know what to do. Sometimes, though, knowledge leads to drama. You remember the feud between two neighbors, both brewers, both excellent, both convinced the other was watering down the grain. There were side-eyes at market, long rants at the grain mill, and a short-lived, accidental dumping of beer jars in front of each other's doorsteps. Eventually, a village elder declared a taste-off. The judges were 3 donkeys, a cat, and a temple scribe who had no sense of taste due to a childhood incident involving pickled fish. The feud is still ongoing, but more quietly now. You stir your batch and catch sight of Neb trying to impress a younger brewer by juggling 2 ladles and a fruit. The fruit falls. The monkey eats it. Neb looks heartbroken. Women run this courtyard, whether anyone says it out loud or not. They remember which batch is fermenting where, whose mix needs another stir, which priest likes his beer thicker, and which festival demands the special honey. They don't ask for praise. They get results. There's a quiet pride in the work. It's not glamorous. You're not paraded down the street. No one carves your name in stone. But when the festival jars are emptied and the workers are fed and the gods are appropriately tipsy, and the other women, they know too. Panifer tosses a bean shell to the cat. You ever think about passing your method on? You nod. Eventually, just waiting for someone with the right hands. Panifer shrugs. They don't need perfect hands, just ones that listen. You consider that. Nearby, Rennie is whispering to her batch again. You're fairly certain her beer actually ferments faster than everyone else's. No one knows how. She won't say, but she does talk to the jars as if they're old friends with delicate feelings. Still sulking, she murmurs, poking one gently. You'll get over it. The monkey steals another piece of dried fig and scampers off toward the drying racks. No one bothers to chase him anymore. He's part of the brewery now. Like the cat. Like the cracked wall with the old palm carving. Like the faint smell of overripe dates that never quite leaves your hands. You look around, jars bubbling, women stirring, men hauling, a child pretending to be a priest with a ladle as a scepter. This is what beer looks like before it's poured. Alive, human, chaotic in the kindest way. You think about the people buried with beer jars. Not just kings. Ordinary people. They went into the afterlife with bowls of thick brew beside them, believing it would be there on the other side. Not gold, not scrolls, just the thing that fed them, warmed them, connected them. You wonder what your batch will taste like after death. Hopefully less like coriander. The sun has begun its slow descent toward the horizon, stretching shadows across the courtyard like lazy cats. The light is gentler now, honey-colored and drowsy. You rise from your patching bench and stretch, the joints in your back singing a tired little hymn of gratitude for the pause. Heninu waves you over. Need help with the funerary batch, he grunts. Not looking up from the clay jar, he's sealing with wax and linen. The beer for the dead. You nod and follow him toward the shaded back alcove where the tune jars are being prepared. It's a quiet space, quieter than the rest of the brewery. No monkey here, no gossip, just the soft shuffling of sandals and the slow scrape of ladles. This batch isn't for market or workers or festivals. It's for someone who won't be sipping it until the afterlife. A local merchant has died, old, generous, well-liked. His family wants to bury him properly. That means food, linen, a handful of shabdas to do his chores in the next world, and beer. Lots of it. Historians agree. Beer was a staple of Egyptian tomb offerings. Archaeological digs have uncovered dozens of well-sealed amphorae tucked beside sarcophagi, many still holding the faint traces of fermented grain and fruit. Some even had little instructions painted on them, ingredients best by dates, and names of brewers long gone. Today, you're making that kind of batch. It's richer than usual. More dates, more honey. The grain was sifted twice. The jars are smaller but heavier, meant to last forever, or at least long enough to impress Osiris. You stir the mixture slowly. The aroma is deeper, darker than your usual brew. More solemn. It smells like memories and celebration and a touch of grief. You remember your first funerary batch. You were a child, helping your mother mash the grain. She explained it gently. This is the beer he'll drink to find his way. Make it kind. It stuck with you. Every funerary batch since has had that little whisper in the back of your head. Make it kind. Rennie is nearby, writing symbols on one of the jars with a reed pen and black ink. She's careful, focused. She has neat handwriting for a brewer. The characters say things like, "May it gladden his heart," and "May it warm his journey." One jar just says, "No sour batches, please." You like that one. You help her stack the finished jars into baskets padded with palm fronds. They'll be carried to the tomb tomorrow, blessed by the priest, and placed near the head of the coffin. The family will leave with tears. The priest will pocket a little something, and the beer will wait. You've always found that comforting, how even in death, no one goes thirsty. Pannifer joins you, humming a low tune. "I hear the man was kind," she says, checking one of the seals. "Tipped well. Didn't cheat his bakers." You nod. He bought Rennie's Blue Lotus blend for his wedding. Pannifer smiles. He had taste. Henanu grunts again, possibly in agreement, or possibly because his knees cracked. You all work quietly. Sheathing jarsh, wiping spilsh, tying rates. It's peaceful, this part of the job. Serious, but not grim. There's something beautiful about knowing your work is headed into eternity. You stir with care. You measure with calm. You remember another funerary jar, an old woman, never married, no children. But her neighbors pooled resources to have a small offering made for her. Your batch for her was simple. Emmer grain, honey, a pinch of mint. Nothing fancy, just enough to say she mattered. Do you think they drink it? Rennie asks suddenly, not looking up. The dead? She nods. Maybe, you say. Maybe they pour a little for their neighbors, too. Henanu snorts. If they're anything like us, they keep the good batch and bury the sour stuff under the sand. You all laugh quietly. The wind picks up, ruffling the linen covers of the jars. You tie them tighter. Nearby, the monkey perches on a wall, watching without comment. Even he knows not to interrupt this moment. The last jar is sealed, labeled blessed. You carry it to the back with care and place it beside the others. 6 jars in total. Enough for the journey. Enough for the feasts. Enough for memory. You take a step back. Rennie murmurs something to the jars, just a few words. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a wish. You don't ask. The courtyard begins to quiet further. The sun's almost gone. The sky turns soft lavender. You rub your hands clean and sit down on the edge of the low wall. You feel steady. There's work left to do. There always is. But in this moment, you've sent something good forward. Something warm. Something kind. You sip from your bowl. It tastes better now. Dusk arrives not with a grand fanfare, but with a quiet exhale. The air cools. The shadows stretch long and slow across the courtyard, and the cats begin their nightly territorial negotiations, which mostly involve sitting in places you like to walk. You stand, stretching your arms above your head, and glance toward the river. The Nile gleams with that soft twilight shimmer, reflecting back the low hum of evening life, Frogs beginning their concerts, birds winging low, and the distant thunk of someone accidentally dropping a water jar. Back in the courtyard, it's inventory time. You and Hinanu begin counting jars, marking them with clay tokens, little discs with symbols etched on their surfaces, wavy lines for full, crosses for half, and the slightly tragic cracked circle for it was full, now it's not. The monkey steals 3 of the tokens and tries to eat one. You give up trying to stop him. Tonight's tally includes a few special amphorae recently delivered from the east. Trade beer, imported from Canaan, or maybe even further, Syria, if the scribes are telling the truth and not just trying to impress each other. These jars are narrower, with tiny loop handles and a dark glaze that catches the light in glossy ripples. You crack one open. The smell is unexpected, earthy, nutty, almost spicy. You lift it to your nose and detect a whiff of carob. Or is it fermented plum? You pour a small bowl and sip. Different. Not better, not worse, just not you. It's thinner, more filtered, lighter on the tongue. Rennie tries a sip and wrinkles her nose. Tastes like regret and perfume. Panifer tastes and nods. I'd drink it if my jaw was tired. Hinanu grumbles. Beer that doesn't chew back isn't beer. You don't disagree. Still, it's fascinating. A glimpse into other ways of brewing. Other hands, other climates. Other gods, maybe somewhere in a Canaanite village. Someone else stirred mash with a stick and hoped their neighbors didn't judge them for the froth level. Historians debate whether Egyptian brewers saw foreign beer as a luxury or a curiosity. Imports were rare and expensive, after all. But you've always suspected the reaction was more personal, less about status, more about taste. People like what they grew up with. You know your beer. You know its weight, its warmth, its hum. Foreign jars are interesting, but they don't bubble with the same memories. You store the imported amphorae in the shaded alcove, away from the main stacks. They'll probably end up on a noble's table, next to peeled grapes and too many opinions about linen folds. As the stars begin to blink awake in the sky, you find yourself near the scribe's bench. He's still here, still scribbling, still muttering to himself. You offer him a bowl from your latest batch. He takes it, sniffs, sips, and blinks. Oh, he says, too much date. No, he murmurs. It's round. You raise an eyebrow. It tastes like a full day, he says a little dreamily, like tired laughter and warm feet. You don't know whether to thank him or check his temperature. He scribbles something else onto his papyrus and then, without warning, recites. Brewed in sun, stir by song. A sip to right the small and wrong. You blink. He looks up deadpan. Just a draft. You walk away before he starts rhyming again. Back at the main vat, Rennie's batch is nearly done. She lifts the cloth cover and peers inside, then gives a small, satisfied grunt. It's foaming gently, evenly, like it knows it's been cared for. You glance at your own jars. Still bubbling. Still alive. You think back to something Panifer once said. Every jar of beer is a gamble. You give the world your best guess, and hope the gods aren't in a sarcastic mood. Tonight, the gods seem forgiving. The courtyard quiets even more now. A few workers shuffle off to their homes, cradling their last sips in smooth clay bowls. The cats curl near the embers. The monkey, for once, has found something non-edible to play with, a piece of discarded rope, and is tangled in it like a creature caught in its own ambitions. You sit near the hearth. Someone's left a plate of bread and lentils. You don't ask who. You just eat it slowly, washing it down with the last of the day's brew. Above you, the stars glimmer. You try to count them. You lose track after 7. Your head is warm. Your feet ache. Your heart is quiet. You close your eyes for a moment. The brewery hums around you, sleepy, full, ready for another day. And for just a moment, everything in your world is exactly where it's supposed to be. It's well past twilight now. The courtyard is bathed in blue shadows and the flickering amber of oil lamps. A low breeze carries the scent of grain and clay, and something else, maybe dried herbs or the memory of warm stones. You finish your plate and stretch your legs in the quiet that always follows a day of successful brewing. There's still one last task before rest. The Nile is rising. The annual flood is near. The river creeps higher with each passing day, its waters slowly licking the edges of the fields and reed beds. Soon, it will claim the brewery's low spots. Soon, your courtyard will become a soggy labyrinth of puddles and floating fig leaves. And soon, the pots you haven't secured will float off like confused turtles. So, tonight, you and a few others finish what must be finished. Hinenu has already started. The older amphorae, the ones prone to tipping, are being moved to the higher racks. The drying mats are stacked and bundled. The cracked jars are patched or sacrificed. One unlucky vessel, leaking slightly and smelling like yesterday's misfortune, is rolled into a corner to be dealt with after the flood, which is local code for never. You begin sealing your jars with thick linen and clay, pressing the covers down with the heel of your hand. Each one feels like a little goodbye, like tucking in a sleepy friend and hoping they don't float away. Rennie hums quietly as she works. Panifer murmurs a list under her breath. Neb knocks over a tool basket. The monkey, mercifully, is asleep inside a grain sack. The Nile floods every year. It brings silt, new life, better harvests. But it also brings mess. Brewing during the flood is near impossible unless you live on stilts or in denial, which is why everyone rushes now, wrapping up the last batches, bottling the final efforts, whispering little encouragements to the jars like anxious parents sending their children to market. Historians tell of the importance of the flood, the inundation, as they call it. It reset the calendar. It fertilized the soil. It fed the gods and the people alike. But to brewers, it was both savior and saboteur. Good water, yes, but bad footing. You've known friends to lose entire batches to a slippery courtyard and one badly timed rain. You finish your last jar and nudge it into position with your foot. It nestles in a place like it knows where to go. You give a quiet pat. The stars are sharp now. The breeze is cooled. Someone lights incense near the wall. A final thank you to Hather, to Tenenet, to whoever has kept the mash from souring this long. You join the little ceremony, not out of obligation, but because, well, why not? If the gods like beer, they'll probably appreciate the gesture. Rennie places a small offering of dried figs beside the jars. Panifer tosses a pinch of ground grain. Hinenu just grunts and leans against the wall. You step back and look at the full racks. The sealed lids, the faint curl of steam still rising from the oldest vat. It's done. Your work is done. You sit again on the low bench beneath the fig tree and sip from a jar too small to be useful and too warm to be polite. It's the end-of-day brew, the scraps, the extras, the almosts. But tonight, it tastes better than anything you've made in weeks. And now the wind down begins. The moon climbs higher, slow and soft, casting silver outlines on the rim of every jar. You can hear the distant croak of frogs, the occasional splash of fish, and the deep, restful silence of a courtyard finally asleep. Your feet are bare now. The stone beneath them is cool, textured, grounding. The grain sacks are stacked neatly, the tools cleaned and stored. Nothing urgent remains, just the hush of night and the satisfaction of a job well done. You lean back, your shoulders easing against the smooth wall, your eyes fluttering half-closed. The world narrows gently, like a bowl being filled with still water. You let your thoughts wander, into reeds swaying by the riverbank, into the soft bubble of resting yeast, into the forgotten rhythms of stirring paddles and shared laughter. The kind of quiet joy that doesn't need music or words, just presence. Maybe tomorrow a jar will crack. Maybe a batch will sour. Maybe the monkey will throw a date pit into the wrong pot. That's for another day. Tonight, the jars are full. The vats are calm. The gods are, you hope, content. You exhale slowly. The night exhales with you. Somewhere, in a sealed tomb, a jar of beer waits to be opened by someone you'll never meet. Someone in the afterlife. Someone who will sip and smile and wonder who you were. And in that moment, perhaps they'll know you were a brewer, and your work was good.